I never imagined that a street child could save my life in a heart-stopping moment of kindness. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The air was thick with anticipation, a storm brewing in the sky above, mirroring the tempest swirling in my chest. I could feel the pulse in my throat, every heartbeat echoing the fear creeping in. As I walked through the crowded streets, I sensed an electric charge, like static before lightning strikes. I was on my way to a meeting that felt more like a funeral than an appointment, my thoughts crowded with worst-case scenarios. The faces around me blurred in a haze of anxiety, their laughter ringing like a cruel mockery in my ears. Then I saw him. A boy, no older than 11. His clothes hung off his small frame, tattered and smudged with dirt. But his eyes, they sparkled with a storm all their own. They bore witness to hardships I couldn't fathom yet radiated a strength that made my heart ache. He was an enigma, a whisper of hope in a world shadowed by despair. As I turned the corner, a sharp jolt of panic twisted in my gut. A car sped around, its tires screeching, metal and rubber in a vicious proximity. My body froze, mind unable to process the danger, heart nearly leaping from my chest. In that electrifying moment, the boy shot forward, arms reaching toward me like a lifeline. Time stretched, the world slowed. I could hear the thud of my heart, the rhythmic breath of the crowd, and then silence. That split second felt like an eternity. Just as the car's front bumper lurched forward, he grabbed my wrist and jerked me back, my feet stumbling on the pavement. I staggered, breathless, soaked in a chilled panic as the car whooshed by, narrowly missing us. The crowd gasped, I gasped. And then, just like that, chaos erupted around us. People clutched their phones, shouting for help. I stared at him, wide-eyed. My heart was in my throat. Who was this child? How could he be so brave? As adrenaline coursed through me, I felt a warm trickle down my cheek. Tears? No, it was blood. My hand grazed my forehead, and my fingers came back stained crimson. Reality crashed back in, confusion stole my breath. The boy's eyes widened, panic sharpening his features. But instead of fear, he stepped closer. In that moment, he transformed from a stranger into a beacon of human connection. He didn't speak, but his expression said everything. I was not alone. He was with me, a soul intertwined with mine for a fleeting instant. And just as quickly as it began, the moment split. Sirens wailed in the distance. Shadows approached authorities, concerned citizens, chaos unfurling like a spilled bag of marbles. I knew I needed to report everything, yet curiosity gnawed at me. Who was he? Where would he go? Would I see him again? My thoughts raced, tangled in threads of urgency and desperation. I wanted to follow him, to understand the heart that had so bravely intervened. But in the tumult of bodies, he vanished. The crowd swallowed him whole. My throat tightened, the lump heavy, longing creeping in. I should chase after him, I should find him. But the reality crashed down again as the paramedics arrived, the fog of my confusion thickening. I felt the cool touch of their hands against my skin as they examined the wound on my forehead. I should be grateful. Instead, panic clawed at my insides. Just moments ago, I was lost in fear, and now I was deeply entwined with gratitude, confusion, and an echoing mystery. What had just happened? Who was this child? Was he real? And how could I repay the life he had so effortlessly saved? As they whisked me away to safety, the questions clung to me like shadows, leaving me suspended in a freezing fear, searching for answers, for a chance to find him again. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference, let's connect. The hospital room was a sterile sanctuary, each beep of the machines cutting through the thick air like a blade. I lay on the cot, the smells of antiseptic and despair swirling around me, fighting to keep the tide of uncertainty at bay. My forehead throbbed with an insistent ache, the patch of gauze now a reminder of how quickly life could shift from ordinary to perilous. As I stared at the stark white ceiling, the world outside felt like a distant echo. They had stitched me up, assured me I was going to be okay, but what did okay mean in a world where a child could risk everything to save a stranger? The images of his face danced in my mind, the intensity of his gaze, the raw fear painted across his youthful features as we paced on the verge of disaster. Are you all right? The nurse asked, her voice gentle yet filled with concern. Her eyes searched mine, attempting to bridge the gap between her clinical detachment and the emotional cyclone spiraling within me. I think so. It's just that. My voice caught, and I swallowed hard. Who was that boy? You were lucky, she replied, her smile a thin line of professionalism. He saved your life, yes, but he was just a kid. How could he even be out there? My voice trembled, the question knotting in my chest. He didn't seem scared at all, she hesitated, her brow knitting slightly. Some children learn to grow up fast in difficult environments. But he's not our concern right now. You need to focus on your recovery. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run after this miracle worker, to trace back through the crowd of voices and faces until I could find him again. But as the nurse shifted her gaze, a surge of helplessness washed over me. A returning flood of panic, inexplicably mixed with a deep sense of admiration and yearning, gripped at the very edges of my heart. A while later, I was alone again, the silence amplifying the thoughts in my head. I picked up my phone, the screen flickering to life as I scrolled through my contacts, each name a reminder of a life once vibrant before the chaos infected it. No messages. No news. My world had fractured, and yet, he was lost amidst the debris. As the hours bled into the evening, an unexpected face appeared in the doorway. It was Michael, my brother. His expression was solemn yet warm, the kind of face that could lead you right back home from a dark place. He could sense the raw edges that refused to be smoothed over. Hey, sis. His voice was low, soothing. I was worried sick. What happened? A boy saved me. The words left my lips before I could organize them, spilling forth like a broken dam. He pulled me back from a car. He just was so brave. Michael raised an eyebrow, his lips quirked with a hint of disbelief. A boy? Are you sure you weren't imagining things after the accident? It was real, Michael. He was there. I need to find him. My voice wavered with urgency, the frustration brewing again. What if he needs help? What if he's slowed down? He said gently, his hands raised in surrender. Let's take a breath, okay? It's been a rough day. You should focus on healing, not on a kid you may never see again. But how could I explain the connection I felt? Those piercing eyes that had seen more hardship than I could ever comprehend, reaching out like a lifeline pulled from the darkness. My heart whispered that there was more to this story, a deeper bond tethered between us, one that demanded exploration. Later, as the night crept in, a flicker of hope arose through the shadows. I fished my notebook out, the leather cracked but filled with memories, thoughts bubbling like an untamed sea. I wanted to write about him, to document the encounter moment that had changed everything. The words tumbled onto the page, spilling forth my astonishment and yearning, sketching the contours of a destiny I hoped would intertwine with his again. But just as I reached the crescendo of my tale, a knock broke through the lull of the night. A nurse peeked her head in, her posture stiff. Sorry to interrupt, but you have a visitor. My pulse quickened. Could it be him? Could fate be weaving our paths together once more? The door opened wider, revealing a tall figure. But instead of the boy with the fierce eyes, it was a different child, a girl, perhaps 8, with wild hair and terrified, wide brown eyes. She stepped inside hesitantly, clutching a stuffed bear as if it were her only lifeline. Are you the one he saved? She asked, her voice as fragile as the bear in her arms. A chill raced up my spine. Who are you talking about? her gaze dropped, fear rolling off her in thick waves. The street boy. He's in trouble, big trouble, the cold weight of dread settled in my stomach. I gripped the edge of the bed. What do you mean? Where is he? But the little girl just shook her head, her eyes pooling with unshed tears. I don't know. He told me to find you if he didn't come back. He said you. She hesitated, her words choking on a sob, you would help him. And as the heart of the room squeezed tighter around me, the truth painfully dawned, my lost connection was in peril, and just as quickly as he had saved my life, he might need saving too. The air in the hospital room grew thick with urgency, my heart pounding furiously against the confines of my chest as the little girl's words settled heavily upon me. The hope I had been nurturing was suddenly riddled with dread, twisting into something dark and gnawing. I couldn't ignore the truth she had brought, fragile as glass yet cutting deep. Please, tell me everything you know, I urged, my voice barely above a whisper, as if saying it too loudly would solidify the terrifying reality. The girl rubbed a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand, swinging the stuffed bear around nervously. It was a lifeline, I realized, not just for her but for me too. His name is Leo, she began, her voice shaking. He sometimes looks after me when I don't have anywhere else to go. The tender bond in her words struck a chord within me, a bond of street children holding on to hope in a world that often turned its back. Where is he now? I pressed, desperate that he was trying to help someone else. Before she stopped, biting down on her lip, the fear etched across her small face threatening to crack. He was just trying to be brave. That I had a million questions swimming in my mind, each one more frantic than the last. Brave how? What happened? But the little girl stepped back, retreating from the weight of her own thoughts. I don't want to get in trouble, okay? I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, please. I pleaded, he saved my life. I can't just sit here knowing he's in trouble. I need to know I can help him too. The girl hesitated, her eyes wide with uncertainty. I could see the indecision flickering within her, the innocent battle between fear and a fierce loyalty to her friend. It mirrored the storm brewing within me, the same stubbornness that had brought me to this moment, fighting against the boundaries of what was safe. Finally, with a gentle resolve, she stepped forward, her eyes brimming with unshed tears yet filled with resolve. I heard the older guys at the corner say he got caught up in something bad, something dangerous, that they were going to make an example of him. Her voice was whisper soft, almost fragile, but I felt every syllable like a dagger to my heart. Examples. I echoed, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. What do you mean? Her voice dropped to a hush, like something to scare everyone else. They want him to stop helping to be brave. Her words formed a haunting echo, twisting at the edges of my mind. Help me find him, I urged, desperation creeping into my voice. We can't let them hurt him. They need to know he's a hero, not a target. I don't know how. Her small voice was trembling, yet within it lay a flicker of courage. Then let's figure it out together. I extended my hand toward her, a beacon of comfort amidst the storm. You know the streets better than anyone here. You're not alone. Well, find a way. As she took my hand, warmth surged through me amid the icy fear that still clawed at my heart. In that moment, I felt a connection not just to Leo, but to her as well, two souls linked by an unbreakable thread woven with heartache and resilience. The nurse stepped in, her eyebrows knitting together in concern as our hands clasped tightly. Everything okay in here? Fine, I said quickly, though the truth lay heavy and unspoken between us. I could feel the momentum of our conversation drawing the energy of the room, my determination woven tightly within the fabric of fear and hope. Leo needs us, I whispered to the girl as the nurse slowly retreated, her presence a necessary curtain hiding me from the reality of my situation. Where do we start? She whispered back, a tentative resolve flickering in her eyes. A plan began to unfold within me, each beat of my heart aligning with the rhythm of possibility. Let's get some supplies, anything we can find. I reached for the empty bedside table, mentally calculating the items that could help us piece together the clues we so desperately sought. You know him, you must have an idea of where he goes. She nodded vigorously, the spark of hope igniting within her tinged with fear and excitement. He. Loves the old bridge. He goes there when he feels sad. The mention of the bridge sent a shiver down my spine. It was a place where shadows often lingered, a threshold between light and darkness ideal for clandestine meetings but perilous for those without a plan. Then that's where we'll go. As we prepared in haste, my heart began to fill with a mix of trepidation and courage. I clutched the remnants of my phone, its battery life dwindling as I fought against the clock. Each second felt like an eternity, every moment precious as I felt the connection to Leo deepen across the invisible thread of our shared experience. But even as I rewrote my narrative, a former victim turned accidental heroine. The clock ticked menacingly, reminding me that the world was not so simple. A shadow loomed outside the safety of this room, whispering its secrets into the night, beckoning me toward an uncertain destiny. With my heart pounding wildly, hand in hand with the little girl and the hope that we shared, I stepped forth into the unknown, ready to seek out Leo, ready to confront the monsters lurking in the alleys. And as we raced down the sterile hall, the echoes of certainty turned into an echoing pulse of uncertainty that pressed me forward toward the unknown. But beneath it all lingered a chilling thought: could we reach him in time, or would I lose the person who had awakened a sense of purpose I never knew I carried? The overtime hours in the hospital had transformed my body into an anxious vessel filled with worry, yet my spirit surged forward with purpose. I held tightly to the little girl's hand, her tiny fingers intertwining with my own, creating a fragile tether amidst the uncertainty. Together, we navigated the sterile hallways, our reflective shoes clacking against the ground, the rhythmic sound a stark contrast to the tempest brewing in my heart. Do you think Leo is really in danger? She asked softly, her eyes darting around in search of the familiar faces of care but finding only unfamiliarity. That I didn't want to burden her with the full weight of what I suspected. Instead, I offered her a reassuring smile. We're going to find him, I said, though the conviction behind those words felt tenuous. He's brave, and you're brave too. Do you think he'll be at the bridge? Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her fear despite the boldness she had shown before. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. That's where he goes when he's sad. It makes sense that he would retreat to a familiar place. As we crossed the threshold into the outside world, the late afternoon sun bathed the street in a warm glow, yet the weight of impending darkness loomed close by. The place I had once considered mundane now appeared almost surreal. The theater of life hurried past us, people rushing for trains, children laughing, music blasting from nearby cafes, every note underscoring our purpose. Look. She pointed, her excitement cutting through the ambience. That's where Leo takes care of the little ones. She tugged at my arm, urging me towards a small corner surrounded by tall buildings. It was a makeshift shelter, littered with toys long forgotten by others, and a group of street children clustered in the shadows. A part of me wanted to run towards them, to probe the dim corners for any trace of Leo. But I hesitated, unwilling to break this fragile moment. The little girl watched me, her expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. Let's be careful, I whispered, kneeling beside her. We need to ask quietly. Not everyone will understand why we're looking for him. As we approached, I could see the wary eyes of the children rise to meet us, guarded yet curious. We're friends of Leo, I said, pausing to breathe as their stares felt invasive. Have any of you seen him? We need to find him. A boy with wild hair and dirt-smudged cheeks emerged from the group, rising tall despite his small stature. Why do you want him? He asked, crossing his arms defiantly. You don't belong here. I felt a surge of vulnerability mingled with the need to protect this girl beside me. Because he's a hero, I said, an edge of desperation threading through my voice. He helps people. He helps her. The kids exchanged glances, the defenses momentarily crumbling like fragile walls. What do you know about Leo? The boy finally asked, his expression softening just enough for me to see fissures of empathy. More than anyone else, I admitted. He saved me. He saved her. I gestured toward the little girl, whose eyes widened at the shared recognition of their bond. The boy looked from her to me, weighing the sincerity of our intentions. He was out last night, helping someone, but then he got taken by some men. What he revealed sent a chill racing straight through me. The color drained from my face as if the very life force I had clung to began to slip away. Taken? Where did they take him? They went towards the old warehouse, just past the bridge, he whispered, as if uttering the words could summon a gust of fresh hope. But you shouldn't go there. It's dangerous. The warning was potent, it hung in the air like thick smoke, obscuring the path ahead. There was an understanding woven into the boy's caution, a recognition of the stakes that mounted higher with every beat of my heart. I couldn't afford to think of the dangers that lay behind, only the urgency pulling us forward. Wait, do you have anything Leo left behind? Anything that could lead us to him? I asked, desperation edging into my tone. With hesitant nods, a couple of the children rifled through the remnants of whatever little belongings they held on to. A girl, no older than 8, stepped out with a weathered notebook, frayed at the edges. He wrote in this about what he saw. The young girl pressed it into my hands, and I opened it, the pages filled with sketches and hurried notes. There were scribbles of alleyways, fragmented stories of moments where he stood brave against cruelty. It was a glimpse into a heart determined to uplift those cast aside. Yes. This is it, I exclaimed, flipping through pages as hope tinged my voice. We can use this to find him. As the sunlight dipped lower in the sky, shadows stretched menacingly from the yawning warehouse ahead. Uncertainty clawed at the back of my throat, the path before us twisted like a murky river. I glanced down at the little girl beside me. Are you ready? Her nod was small but unwavering, anchoring my own shifting resolve. We moved forward and felt the distance between safety and peril gradually widen with every step. As we approached the warehouse, the light slipped away, and an unexpected heart-pounding revelation seized me. A familiar silhouette stood against the wall of the dilapidated building. My throat tightened at the sight. It was Leo, but something felt terribly wrong. My breath caught in my throat as I watched figures surround him, imposing shadows flickering across the waning sun. In that instant, standing on the precipice of hope and despair, I realized desperation had woven a darker thread into our journey than I had ever prepared for. We were not just searching for a hero, we were stepping into chaos. Leo! I cried, my voice breaking through the air, desperate and primal, a silent plea barely escaping my lips. I had thrown myself into the storm, now I had to face its fury. The cries of my heart echoed against the hollow walls of the warehouse, but they fell on deaf ears, swallowed by the encroaching silence that wrapped around me like a vice. Leo, dear Leo, how had we gotten here? My skin prickled, every instinct screaming for me to retreat, yet the little girl's hand was tightly clasped in mine, her warmth a flicker of courage in the overarching dread. The men surrounding him were hulking figures, their postures menacing as they loomed over the fragile silhouette of the boy who had stood as a beacon of hope for so many. I hadn't imagined this. The very idea of him being cornered, vulnerable, crushed down the fragile piece of resolve swelling within me. Leo! I called again, louder this time, the desperation clawing at my throat. At the sound of my voice, his head snapped in my direction, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. His eyes widened, filled with a strange mix of relief and fear. Was he surprised that I had found him or terrified that I had put myself in danger? Get back! He shouted, his voice firm but laced with panic. Run away, but I couldn't run. Not when Leo needed me. We're here to help you. I yelled, hoping it would reach him through the haze of turmoil surrounding us. The men turned, their heads pivoting like malice incarnate. For a brief moment, time seemed suspended as their gazes locked onto us. I felt every ounce of their disdain as if it were a physical weight pressing against my chest. This was not a scene I had envisioned. My expectations had been laced with hope, not this raw, visceral threat. Who do you think you are? One of them sneered, stepping forward with a menacing air. You think these streets are a playground? You're about to find out how wrong you are. Leo's gaze flickered to the little girl beside me, his expression shifting to one of fierce protectiveness. Get her out of here, he urged, his voice cracking with urgency. They'll hurt you if you stay, but behind his plea was a different kind of desperation. I knew reflective eyes his were filled with a depth of loss and resignation. It ignited something inside me, a fire that pushed through my fear. No! I shouted, digging in my heels. You don't have to bear this alone." Then, unexpectedly, a small figure darted out from the doorway of the warehouse, announcing itself with a rush that cut through the tension like a knife. The wild-haired boy from the group we had visited earlier had joined us, his stance defiant. "Leave him alone!" he cried, mirroring Leo's protectiveness. The men turned their hostility toward this new interloper. "What does a rat like you want?" one growled, menace oozing from every word. But the boy stood firm. "He's one of us. You can't take him." In that moment, my heart swelled. Here was unexpected kindness emerging from the shadows, a reminder that compassion often thrived in the most unlikely of places. It resonated within me, a glimmer of hope in the darkness, a challenge to the chaos before us. "Leo, come with us," I urged again, desperation infusing my voice. "We can find another way." He hesitated, his eyes searching mine for assurance, as if willing to believe that our combined strength could pierce through the darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. But the men were closing in, their aggression palpable. "You think you can just waltz in here and play hero? This isn't a game," one shouted, gripping a rusted pipe threateningly. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from behind me. I spun around to see a group of the street children surging forward, their bodies a sea of hope crashing against the shore of fear. They were not just warriors of the forgotten, but guardians of the ones they held dear. "Protect Leo. Protect them." Their voices rang out in a fierce chorus, emboldened by an unwavering loyalty and a sparkling sense of community. As they charged toward the men, the dynamics shifted. Momentum swung in our favor, providing a flicker of possibility amidst the encroaching shadows. The little girl squeezed my hand tighter, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. But just then, the ringleader among the men caught sight of my heart racing as I held the notebook, its pages fluttering in the wind. He stormed forward, snatching it from my grasp. "What's this? Some stupid memoir?" My breath hitched in my throat as he rifled through the drawings and stories Leo had crafted, moments of courage and beauty that had become a lifeline for those in need. The ringleader's sneer twisted as he flipped through the pages, eyes narrowing as he noted the sketches of this boy, this beacon of hope. "What if I decide to make an example out of you today?" he taunted, his voice dripping with menace. "Let's see what happens when you try to stand against me." That my heart pounded even harder, dread pooling in my stomach. I could feel the walls closing in as the threat became all too real. "No," I whispered, knowing the power of those pages could either ignite strength or unravel our fragile hope, yet, in that moment, I couldn't back down. Not anymore. Not with so much at stake. "Leo!" I shouted, fighting through the quaking fear that threatened to drown me. "Give them something to remember. Show them what you can do." With his eyes blazing, he took a step forward, the steely resolve returning to his posture. "Together, we are stronger," he said, his voice ringing out above the chaos, a rallying cry for the vulnerable ones gathered. Time slowed once more as the realization hit me, revealing another layer to our struggle. It wasn't just about rescuing Leo, it was about reigniting the flame of hope within those who had fought so bravely for survival. If we stood united, perhaps we could shatter the chains holding so many captive. And then, out of the chaos, a sudden movement drew my gaze to the shadows beneath the warehouse. It was just a fleeting moment, barely perceptible, but a sense of something darker lurked there, something malignant and cruel, watching us with unyielding intent. As I looked back to Leo, adrenaline surged, and my voice surged in defiance of the storm around us. The world beyond our fight faded as I grasped the enormity of what was at stake. We were not just facing mere men, we were calling attention to a truth that could change everything. Before I could process it fully, I felt a splintering thrill run through me. This wasn't just a quest for Leo anymore, it had become a reckoning, a journey that could unearth kindness from within the most enigmatic souls. But even in my pulsating excitement, unease crept in. What would happen when we faced the truth buried deeper? As tension crackled through the air, the ticking clock counted down to a moment that could shatter our fragile unity. "Now!" I shouted, my heart racing. "Together!" But as we surged forward in a whirlwind of hope and courage amid the low growls of impending chaos, the lurking darkness I'd sensed finally revealed itself to me, twisting and clawing, ready to unravel the very fibers of everything we believed in. The energy of the moment felt electric, as if the very air crackled in anticipation of what was to come. We surged forward together, the tide of street children and makeshift warriors uniting as one. And then, the horrifying shuffle of heavy boots echoed around us, sharpening the impending threat, a reminder that darkness always lingers just beyond the faintest hint of light. "Protect Leo!" I heard the little girl behind me cry out again, her voice cutting through the chaos, and I felt a wave of determination swell within me. If we were to overcome this nightmare, we had to become one in heart, in spirit, in action. As we charged at the men, I caught a glimpse of Leo, his face a mask of sheer focus. He ignited the strength inside me, a flicker of hope radiating from his core. These men, who thrived on fear, were just shadows against the brilliance of our unity. What we had was a bond forged by trials shared and lives uplifted, a connection stronger than any weapon they wielded. Amidst the shouts of defiance and the clattering of scuffed shoes, a fearsome figure appeared from the depths of the warehouse, a tall man, clad in dark clothing, with eyes as cold and calculating as the steel he carried. He emerged with a swagger, as if the chaos around him were of no concern. I felt a chill creep up my spine. This was the one who orchestrated the violence that tore through our lives, the puppet master behind the curtain of dread. "You think you can take him?" he boomed, his voice deep and unsettling, sending tremors through our defiant line. The men faltered for a moment, uncertainty dancing in their eyes as they glanced uncertainly toward their ringleader. "Stand your ground!" Leo shouted, urging his makeshift army forward. It was a declaration, one that resonated. We could be victorious if we stayed strong together. If we didn't waver in fear, then things began to spiral. The dark-clad man lifted his hand and snapped his fingers, and pearls of dread rolled over us. Like bees from a disturbed hive, more figures poured into the scene, emerging from the shadows where they had blended unnoticed. They were hardened faces and cold eyes, threatening in every sense. Panic surged through the children beside me. I could feel the fear emanating like a palpable force, but I wouldn't allow it to snuff out the flicker of hope. "We've faced worse odds," I reminded them, though my own heart raced with trepidation. "They underestimate our strength." In that instant, the little girl squeezed my hand tighter, her gaze unwavering. "We can do it," she whispered, the conviction in her voice weaving a tether among our group. But before I could draw strength from her innocence, the ringleader laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the warehouse, drowning out our rallying cries. "You think you can defeat us with a gaggle of street rats?" He gestured to the girl, a twisted grin pulling on his lips. "Take her. Let's see how brave her little heart is when she realizes what's at stake." My stomach turned at the venom in his words, my instincts screaming to protect her, to snatch her away from impending danger. She was just a child, innocent and beautiful, yet he was willing to use her fear as a weapon against us. "No!" I shouted, stepping forward instinctively, the depths of my heart hammering a furious rhythm in my chest. "You won't take any of them. Not now, not ever." But then, just as I found my voice in this storm, a glimmer of movement caught the corner of my eye. Leo had begun to move, his determination like a burning star. I watched in awe, the surge of pride mingling with dread, as he pushed past me and stepped into the open, all but daring the men to advance. With a flick of his wrist, he revealed a small, worn-out charm he had kept close, a token of the many lives he had touched, every mark and dent symbolizing the resilience that thrived within. "You don't know what we can do together," he declared, his voice quaking only slightly as it immersed the space around us with newfound strength. The ringleader's expression faltered, a crack appearing in his icy facade. For an instant, hesitation washed over the men flanking him. But that flicker was fleeting, quickly replaced by anger as he recalled his dominance. "Take him down!" he bellowed, and the air erupted into chaos once more. It all started in slow motion, bodies collided, limbs flailed, and the cries of defiance merged into a primal roar. I moved instinctively, pushing toward Leo, wanting to break the creeping tides of despair swarming around him, but amidst the fray, the little girl stumbled, crying out as her grip slipped from my hand. My heart dropped like a stone, panic seizing me as I saw her fall back toward the hands of the men I feared most. "No!" I yelled, lurching forward into the roiling mass, adrenaline coursing through my veins. A flurry of shadows engulfed me, twisting around my limbs, and for a moment, I was lost in a sea of uncertainty. Yet even as I stumbled, I felt a familiar warmth, small hands finding their way to mine. The wild-haired boy, who had once been a stranger, was suddenly my lifeline. His eyes were fierce as he pulled me back, together. "Keep moving," he shouted, urging me toward Leo, who remained out front, unwavering beneath the weight of the chaos enveloping us. That we pushed forward, an unyielding wave amidst the crashing turmoil. Hope, the delicate, intimate flame within each of us, guided us through the affliction. We were no longer individuals striving to free one boy, we were a tapestry woven with stories of survival and determination, but the clearer our path became, the more I felt the ground shift beneath us, the more the nightmare revealed its true complexity. Just as I reached the edges of the encroaching chaos, I felt another presence far more sinister than anticipated. Detecting the shadows lurking at the edges of the warehouse, I could feel something darker pulsating, a bent malice seeped in silence. It scattered my resolve as I turned just in time to see a tall figure emerging, looming behind the chaos, a familiar silhouette casting a shadow. I thought I had escaped Leo's past, threatening to collide with our fragile present. "Looks like you've gathered quite the group," Carl laughed, his eyes glinting with an emotion I couldn't decipher, a cruel smirk betraying all semblance of the closeness we once shared. The roar of the battle around us faded as the reality set in. The man who had haunted Leo's memories was standing right there, an uninvited specter. There was no denying that the toughest part had merely begun. This was the darkness we had known and feared, now materialized before us, and as the battle raged on around me, I couldn't help but wonder, how would we confront this revelation? Would the bond we forged last, or were we destined to be torn apart by ghosts refusing to be laid to rest? As dread tightened its grip around my heart, I knew deep down that our fight was far from over. I stood frozen, a whirlwind of confusion cascading through my mind as Carl's shadow darkened the space between us. His grin held an unsettling familiarity, worn like an old coat. The sight of him stirred memories I had buried deep, forcing me to confront a storm of emotions, fear, betrayal, and the flickers of long-lost trust. Leo's breath hitched beside me, the adrenaline that had driven him forward now trapped as he faced a specter of his past. I could feel his body tense, like a taut string ready to snap. The voices around us blurred into incoherent murmurs, the chaos of the warehouse fading into a dull thrum. Carl was the living testament of all that had brought Leo to this moment. His every decision, each step we took together now cast in doubt. "Did you really think you could escape me?" Carl taunted, his voice smooth yet laced with malice, pulling at the threads of our fragile unity. "Look at all this. The army of children and a defiant leader. Such a noble effort. You think they will save you?" A tremor coursed through our group as his words hung in the air, heavy and oppressive like the humidity before a storm. The little girl, still trembling beside me, reached for my hand again, grounding me in the present. With a gentle squeeze, she reminded me that amidst the threat, there remained innocence, a kind of courage I desperately needed. "No one is going to save us," Leo said, his voice steadier now as he stepped forward, defiance etched into his features. "We save ourselves." "That's cute," Carl sneered, but his amusement was tinged with malaise. He stepped closer, his predatory gaze scanning the motley band of children who stood together, postured yet uncertain. "But tell me, how do you plan to save yourselves when you have so little to work with? Do you have a plan, Leo? A strategy?" The way he said Leo's name felt like poison on his tongue, each syllable designed to unravel. "What is it, Carl? Are you here to gloat?" Leo's voice rose, fervent, masking the doubt that clung to his heart. "Is that all you are? You pick on the weak, but that only shows your own cowardice." A flicker of something shifted in Carl's expression, distant for a moment, but then it reformed to the familiar disdain. In that instant, I realized this confrontation was no mere coincidence, it was a carefully orchestrated ambush, predicated on exploiting our vulnerabilities. That he turned, scanning the faces of the children around us, the tension palpable, radiating like static electricity. "You think a group of abandoned souls can withstand the truth?" Fight against what is inevitable. How long before they lose faith in someone as broken as you? In that moment, a small explosion of resistance ignited within our ranks. The children, driven by the dewy courage only they could possess, began to murmur amongst themselves, tightening their grasp on one another like a human chain refusing to yield. I saw the boy from earlier, the wild-haired confidant who had proved essential, his fierce eyes lighting up as he said, "Look at us. We've survived together more than any of you ever could." Together, came the chorus of voices, resonating like a symphony amid the noise of chaos. Carl raised his hands in mock surrender, his arrogance unwavering. "You think your unity means something? In the end, it's every child for themselves. If I were you, I'd forget about that little girl you're so fond of," he sneered, pointing a bony finger toward her. "When push comes to shove, who will stand by your side?" I wonder, fear clawed at my insides, but as I glanced at the little girl beside me, something shifted. It wasn't just her innocence, it was her unyielding faith, the very thing we all needed, shining through the uncertainty. "Together," I echoed, feeling the conviction swell within, "that's our strength. Well, fight, no matter the odds." As I spoke, reverberations of defiance ignited around me like sparks scattered by the wind. Leo turned to me, a flicker of disbelief mixed with admiration dancing in his eyes before settling into a determined resolve. "And if you think you can manipulate and divide us, Carl, you're wrong," Leo shouted, his voice lifting above the chaos, resonating with a newfound vigor as if we were each a part of him, unintentionally bound together. "You might have tried before, but what you underestimate is the strength we find in our scars." The ringleader's expression darkened, every confident facade began to crumble. He lunged forward, anger flashing like lightning across his features, but the children surged around USA wall of unity. That is when it happened. An unexpected act of kindness unfurled in the midst of the storm. A stranger from the corner of the warehouse, a woman I had never seen before, stepped into the fray, her presence commanding. There was no hesitation in her eyes, she held a wooden plank her hands had laced with makeshift strength. "Let me help," she shouted, her voice piercing the din of chaos as she struck the ground, rallying more children to join her. "No one's alone in this fight." Waves of astonishment coursed through the group, and in that moment, I understood, hope came in many forms, often disguised in urgency. It rallied from the unlikeliest of sources, each child a source of raw energy refusing to yield, but with hope also came danger, and my heart stammered at what lay ahead. As we rallied together, the ground shook with uncertainty. Carl, enraged, lunged toward the woman, seeking to squash whatever light had entered our encircled space. With my heart pounding in rhythm with the chaos, I turned to Leo. "What do we do?" The dread was a bitter taste on my tongue. In that breathless moment before the storm of combat surged forward once more, Leo's eyes latched onto mine filled with fire, determination, and a resolve that knew no bounds. "We fight and protect every last one of them," he assured, as though stating a promise crafted of steel that I knew the looming darkness still threatened to consume us all. Just as Leo reached for my hand, I felt a fresh wave of ferocity sweep through the assemblage, but alongside it surged an unshakable tension, a haunting meditation whispering that the past was about to rear its ugly head once more. My heart raced as I spotted Carl narrowing his gaze beyond the flurry of children, his eyes scanning, searching, calculating. Lurking in that oppressive space was something even darker and more unforgiving than a mere man's ambitions, a truth about Leo's past that could shake our unity to its very core, and as the shadow of that revelation bore down on us, I felt a chill of panic rise within my throat. What if our confrontations were merely the beginning? What if our fearless courage called upon greater sacrifices than any of us could endure? Before I had time to consider how to respond, Carl made his move. The scream that followed shattered our fragile bond like glass beneath a hammer, and as the darkness lurked just behind us, I braced myself for what lay in store. "Leo!" I shouted, but even as I called out, I knew in my heart it was a race against time, against a past clamoring to be avenged. The battle was far from over, it had only just begun. The warehouse crackled with tension as the world split into vivid frames, frozen moments splashed with raw fear and urgent defiance. Carl's attack had shattered the fragile equilibrium of our group, and as the shrieks of terror echoed around us, I felt the ground beneath me shift into an abyss of uncertainty. Stay together. Leo's voice cut through the chaos, a beacon in the encroaching storm. But as his words rolled over us, filled with the promise of protection, I could see the fissures forming the cracks in our united front, a consequence of fear gnawing at us from within. The woman with the wooden plank stood her ground against Carl, her fierce presence shielding the clustered children who scurried to form a protective circle. Her unwavering strength was palpable, yet I felt the urgency rise, a desperate need to shield the little girl beside me. "Stay close," I murmured, clutching the girl's hand, her little fingers trembling in response. No one could be left vulnerable, the stakes were too high. As Leo lunged to intercept Carl, a sickening thud met the air, puncturing the adrenaline that had surged like lifeblood through our veins. He and Carl clashed, chaos swirling as fists connected with flesh. The sound echoed like thunder in an empty sky, and my stomach twisted as I witnessed the battle unfold. "Leo!" I shouted again, but my voice was nearly drowned out by the chaos. The children around me, now galvanized by the urgency of the moment, murmured fragments of prayer, their breath hitching in collective fear. Carl, for all his bravado, began to falter. He shifted his stance, eyes darting back to the throng of children who were no longer just witnesses to the fight, they had transformed into warriors, clinging to hope, grasping for unity even amidst the danger. Could they truly stand against the darkness? A wild surge of encouragement pulsed through me, accompanied by the child's grip on my hand. The echo of a shared heartbeat mirrored my own as I turned to the other kids assembled, their faces smeared with dirt but alight with resolve. "We can't let our fears swallow us. We need to fight." I shouted, hoping to awaken the slumbering strength each of them concealed. Just as another strike was thrown, sending Leo stumbling back, I was anchored by a sense of surprising clarity. In a moment of instinct, I reached out toward the woman wielding the plank, intertwining our strengths, hers of courage, mine of belief. "Get the children out!" I cried, urging her to help me form an escape. Protect them, but the moment hung in a fragile balance. I felt the weight of unspoken histories swirl around us. A glimmer of pain blazed across Leo's face as he caught his breath, eyes darting to me with unshakable determination. "I won't let him do this. Not to any of us," he vowed, his voice low but infused with fierce conviction. With every ounce of his humanity, Leo stood his ground. The children around him rallied, and in that chaotic tapestry of emotion, I could see a flicker of something hopeful emerge, camaraderie in the guise of childhood, undeterred by looming shadows, and it was in that moment I realized this was more than a battle against Carl. It was a fight for identity, for safety, and for a sanctuary we desperately craved. The challenges ahead were not merely physical but spiritual. The scars we wore were both a blessing and a curse, but they united us. Suddenly, out of the tumult, a sudden and shocking scream pierced the air. It was the little girl at my side, her voice rising to a crescendo that shattered my focused resolve. I turned to her just as she pointed, her finger trembling as it caught sight of something I had yet to process. "Look!" she cried, panic flooding her expression. "They are coming!" From the shadows crept figures emerging, not from our ranks, but driven by the weight of what was lost, the ghosts of our pasts manifesting as a chorus of unresolved pain. They were children, lost souls drawn together by similar tragedies, and fear surged through my heart again. "Who are they?" Leo gasped, momentarily distracted, the battle slowing for just a beat. The woman steadied herself as she scanned the advancing group. "Where did they come from?" Her tone shifted from uncertainty to calculative wariness. Yet I felt something deeper, a wave of recognition washing over me. In the midst of turmoil, clarity ignited within, birthed from memories I had fought to suppress. And then I remembered, among those moving shadows, features emerged that sent shockwaves through my very core. Realization stung my heart. They're from the old neighborhood," I blurted in disbelief, the words fumbling as they slipped past the tight knot of fear in my throat. "Some of these kids from before." My eyes widened as a sinking feeling took root in my stomach. That haze, the open wound of nostalgia melded with growing terror. If they had survived, navigating the same storm of despair we had once faced, what brought them here? What dark threads of fate trapped them in this very moment? As confusion intermingled with dread, I felt the certainty of an unraveling truth convulse in my chest, its pulse syncopated with the mounting chaos. The ties that bound our past could either strengthen our bonds or seal our fates. Before I could voice my dread or grasp the significance of our shared histories, shadows collided, reverberating with a turmoil more profound than our immediate battle. "Get ready!" Leo shouted just as the group converged, their faces both familiar and foreign, ripples from a life we thought we had escaped. For better or worse, our past had returned, not as saviors but harbingers of what we had fought so hard to forget. With eyes full of uncertainty, I stood poised between hope and an impending storm, realizing that sometimes, the very thing we feared most could also be our salvation. And as a new wave of chaos loomed over us like an unforgiving tide, the air crackled with the anticipation of revelations yet to come, ones that would shake the foundations of our already fragile world to its very core. The jagged edges of the moment fractured across the warehouse, every breath infused with tension as the children before us, faces flickering in and out of recognition, threatened to pull us down into a chasm of memories we thought buried. Can we trust them? My heart whispered in fear, straining against the urgent drum of my pulse. Leo's steady gaze met mine, and in it, I sought reassurance. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice low. "But we have to make a choice. Stay and fight or run and hide." The gravity of his words weighed heavy in the air, rendering us both painfully aware of our next move. The encroaching shadows swelled, revealing not just children but echoes of our past, those who had once played in the dust of our old neighborhood, who had shared our laughter, our tears. Their presence was like a mirror reflecting the fragile constructs of our identities, and as I watched their uncertain expressions, I wondered if we had truly left that ghostly timeline behind. "Maybe we should just talk to them," I suggested cautiously, my voice trembling with the thread of hope struggling to break free. "They might be scared too. If we show them we're not a threat." Leo nodded, digesting my words while glancing at the approaching group, where hesitation was palpable. "Okay, but stay behind me," he said softly, trying to create a barrier, a wall made of courage between me and the unknown. As Leo stepped forward, the children shifted uneasily, warily eyeing our group. The air was thick with the scent of fear and uncertainty, suffocating them in an invisible bind. I followed close behind, ready to intervene if chaos erupted again. "Hey!" Leo called, his voice steady yet full of uncertainty. "We don't want to fight. We want to understand." The response was met with silence so profound it thundered. The shared glances among the old neighborhood kids ignited confusion within me. What had driven them to wander into this battleground? There was a flicker of recognition, a sense of belonging despite the rifts that had formed. Then, from the group, a child stepped forward whose face I could not forget. His eyes, wide and innocent, were the windows to heartbreak that mirrored my own. "We heard you were in trouble," he said, his voice soft but fraught with unfiltered worry. "We thought you might need help." "Help?" The word hung in the air, wrapping around us like a fragile thread connecting old scars to new battles. I could scarcely fathom the complexity of emotions swirling behind such a simple declaration. Were we truly so intertwined that the threads of our stories led us back to each other? As the boy continued to speak, more children joined him, forming an alliance between our past and present, where desperation and hope became inextricably linked. "Please," he pleaded, "we've seen what he does. He's taken people. Our friends. We can help fight him." The tremor in his voice tugged at the chords of my heart, igniting embers of shared pain and a yearning for solidarity. But just as the warmth of this unexpected alliance brewed, a figure ominously stalked from the shadows behind them. Carl had regrouped, a storm of fury coiling within him. "Look who we have here, just a bunch of strays gathered for a lost cause," he sneered, his demeanor encapsulating malice. "You think they can help you? They're just as lost as you." The newfound bonds between our children began to quake under the weight of his taunts, doubt creeping again. The newfound allies glanced at one another, uncertainty brightening in their eyes. I felt the crack widen, and an instinctive surge of desperation compelled me forward, my voice threading through the tension. "No. They are not lost. They came to help. We are all here together." Leo glanced back at me, his features taut with determination, his posture unwavering, as if to say we could weather this storm together. By openly acknowledging our shared existence, a flicker of strength emanated from the gathered children, igniting determination in their gazes, but Carl's laughter sliced through the air, menacing, mocking the growing flickers of hope as he stepped closer, cocking his head with a predatory smile. "You think you can fight me? You think they care about you?" His words dripped with venom, a reminder that the battle ahead was not merely for survival but for every heart tethered to the web of our past. "Fight together," I implored, the urgency of my voice powered by the desperation to ignite a spark that could bridge the divide. "This time we're stronger, and we can't let him take anyone else." In response, the old neighborhood kids began to step forward, their collective resolve igniting beneath the surface of hesitation, morphing into an unwavering wall of solidarity. They stood side by side with us, united by forgotten familiarity, a true testament to the resilience that danced in the air. But the moment was short-lived. From behind Carl sprang another unknown figure, emerging like a specter from the Shadowsa girl I recognized. "Don't trust them," she shouted, her face contorted with fear and anger, shattering the fragile atmosphere of solidarity we'd built. "He's lying. They're not safe." The demand laid bare a violent truth. We stood on the cusp of unity, teetering on a precipice, yet reality threatened to plunge us back into chaos. It was an emotional cliffhanger steeped in uncertainty, a cruel reminder that acceptance could just as easily knit the fabric of our fates together as it could fray it into irreconcilable threads. As the girl's words hung heavy in the air, the echoes of our past collided with the turbulence of our present, leaving me paralyzed between hope and fear, the next moment poised to unravel everything we had built. The air pulsed with tension, every heartbeat reverberating through the expansive warehouse, igniting an urgency that clawed at my insides. The child's terrified warning sliced through any semblance of unity we had managed to build, pouring molten doubt into our fragile bond. I could feel the weight of uncertainty settle over Leo as he fought against the tide of voices, striving to bring clarity to the chaos surrounding us. "Don't listen to her," I shouted, desperate to reclaim the momentum our collective strength had just gained. "We can be what we need. We can fight together." But the girl's words pricked at the surface of ignorance. They had dug up fears we had all kept buried under layers of resilience. Faces turned uncertain, glances darting back and forth as if searching for clarity in a storm of fear and doubt. Could our scars ever truly heal? Could we ever be free of the past that loomed in the shadows? "Do you think you know them?" The girl yelled again, her voice trembling yet fierce as eyes turned toward her. "They have lived sheltered lives while we've fought in the streets. They're just as weak as you." Carl seized the moment, stepping forward as his mouth curled into a triumphant grin. "Listen to her," he mocked, deliberately escalating the fracture growing within our ranks. "You can cut ties and pretend you're family, but deep down, you will always be pawns in this game. The moment the tide turns, it's every child for themselves. You'll see." The agreement from those lingering shadows felt loud and oppressive, a suffocating weight that threatened to pull us apart. My heart raced even faster, the urgency blossoming within me like a wildfire. Leo caught my eye. I saw a flicker of uncertainty, an all too familiar concern that sparked the primal instinct to protect and to fight. With resolve, I stepped forward, aware of the stakes tethered tightly to hope and fear. "So what if we've faced different struggles? All pain is valid. We have something they don't, a choice to stand and resist the darkness together." I could feel the collective pause in the air, an invitation, a challenge born from the depths of both anguish and hope. The suggestion hung in the ether like a thread beckoning to be woven into the fabric of our existence. Suddenly, Leo's voice stood alongside mine, threaded with a determination that pulsed like a beacon. "We are not defined by our struggles. We define who we are in response to what threatens to tear us apart." His eyes burned bright with the conviction I had so much admired, and as he continued, the words poured forth like healing salve. "We've been alone for too long. They can't break the bonds we've forged here." The little girl by my side squeezed my hand tighter, her trust cementing my resolve, and I began to sense the shift in the air. Awareness spread amongst the other children, lingering like fresh rain on parched soil. One of the boys, the wild-haired one, stepped forward to echo Leo's words. "Yeah. We are together in this, and we can't leave anyone behind. Together. More voices began to ripple, building momentum as hope surged from all sides, drowning out the shadows of doubt that once clouded our hearts. The children from the old neighborhood shifted, glancing at one another, and I could see the splinter of hesitation begin to mend beneath shared intent. The tremors in the air morphed into something resilient, something palpable. It became clear that a choice had unfolded before us, the choice to rise or fall, and right then and there, I felt the cords of trust weaving tighter among us. Stand united! I bellowed, the fervor of my voice cutting through the gathering dark, but Carl wasn't done. You think this little charade will save you? He laughed derisively, eyes narrowing. You want to be heroes? You'll only be stories lost in the snare of the streets. Returning to the fray, he lunged, his frame moving with a malevolent urgency as he bore down on us like an avalanche, but we wouldn't bend. The children surged forward, a wall of hearts and fists locked together, embodying the undeniable strength of our unity. The moment became a time-warped crescendo of resilience. The darkness trembled under the brightness of our determination, each of us rising up to claim our place in a fight that transcended our individual battles, together. Leo shouted again, unyielding in his presence, resonating with power. And just like that, we surged forward as only an echo of Defiancia, ragtag assembly of forgotten souls igniting against the tides of despair. In that communion of raw vulnerability, I finally understood the strength we truly wielded. We weren't just fighting to save Leo, this became our fight, a fight to save each other. With every punch thrown against Carl and his men, ultimate freedom unfurled in the air, an ache for safety that belonged to every child lingering amidst us. As the chaos unfolded, I took a breath, letting the energy surge around me fill my veins with a primal scream of purpose. I was just as weighed down as any of them, carrying scars stacked high, yet I stood resolute, a beacon of resolve amid the fray. We are not afraid. I called out, my voice echoing back to me, fueled by the myriad of souls willing to stand and fight alongside, and then, in the tumult of shadows and light, the final move came. Carl and his men faltered as the ground beneath them shifted, suddenly unsteady as a bulwark rose up from the remnants of our past, a cascading wave of newfound strength cascading forth from the very heart of the children clustered around. Amidst this remarkable momentum, I turned to see the little girl, her spirit aflame with resolve, standing beside Leo, bold as the sun breaking through storm clouds. He's not going to hurt us, she declared, fierce and strong, no longer a mere bystander, but a warrior ready to protect the bonds we had created. And just as that assurance spilled from her lips, hope exploded around us. A beautiful rebellion birthed from every heart, each voice, each fight, cutting deeper into the shadows that threatened to ensnare our souls. In that moment, we were no longer just street children, we were a force of reckoning as we collided against Carl, wrapping the past into the fabric of our present, sewing together the tapestry of our collective strength. In those heart-stopping moments, with fists raised, hearts united, the darkness held no power over us anymore. As the resonance of our unity clashed against Carl and the remnants of the chaos around us, I felt an overwhelming wave of peace wash over me, a long-fasted assurance, rising like dawn after the deepest night. It was then that I realized our journey hadn't been solely about saving Leo, it had become a passionate pilgrimage toward acceptance, forgiveness, and healing. We were not simply survivors, we were a family woven from the ashes of our past, forever connected in body and spirit. And as the cry of our united voices filled the air, I knew without a doubt that even in the darkest moments, together, we could shape our fate and forge a path free from the shadows. Then, in a breathless moment, silence fell like snow upon our chaos, bringing clarity in its wake. In the stillness, I turned to Leo, our eyes meeting for an eternity, an understanding passing between us that no words could contain. It was in that suspended heartbeat that I knew. The strongest bonds are forged in the fires of adversity, and we would rise, together, forever. Together, he whispered, and as hope surged once more, I knew we would never let each other go again. The final echoes of our unity resonated in the air like a pledge bound by love, forged in catharsis. Sometimes saving each other was worth every ounce of fight that lay ahead. We would rise, always, together.